So welcome to this episode of Criminology Chats. I'm JR.
And I'm Miranda.
All right, and Miranda, we have a really interesting case today, wouldn't you say?
Yes, we do.
Today's case has it all. It has murder for money, family betrayal, and a Mississippi Supreme Court decision that hinged on what a social worker wasn't allowed to say at trial. This is the case of Kristi Fulgham, and she's serving a life sentence without parole for killing her husband, Joey Fulgham, in the state of Mississippi.
All right. This episode contains explicit content as physical violence, domestic abuse, child sexual abuse, as well as other explicit comments that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast episode is for informational purposes only and does not constitute psychological, medical, legal, or professional advice. The speakers in this episode are not psychological or legal professionals, and the opinions and comments by them are solely for entertainment purposes. Items discussed in this episode include information provided in emails and phone calls by an incarcerated individual and has not been verified through research, and the speakers are commenting on this is what reflected in those communications along with online open source information about the case. Before we dive in, I need to tell you upfront, this case involves the death penalty and it gets complicated. But stick with JR and I because of the legal issues here. They matter. They matter a lot, and by the end of this episode, you'll understand why the Mississippi Supreme Court said Kristi Fulgham deserved to die for what she did, but also why they threw out her death sentence. Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, we're going to start with a little bit of a backstory, okay? And this comes out of some court documents that we found online. Kristi and Joey Fulgham got married in 1991. They lived in Starkville, Mississippi, which is a college town and home of the Mississippi State University. They had two kids, Tyler and Darian. Kristi also had a daughter named Haley from a previous relationship, and by all accounts, they were the typical family. But, as you know, sometimes things can go wrong, so their relationship started to unravel. And about a year and a half before Joey's death, Kristi had moved out and took her kids and moved in with a boyfriend named Harvey in Jackson, Mississippi, which is about an hour and a half south of Starkville. Now, I don't know about you, Miranda, but hey, when someone moves their kids and themselves into a new boyfriend's home while still married, that's pretty clear that maybe the marriage is over. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So back then, something changed. By May of 2003, Kristi had moved back in with Joey. Do you think that person might take you back? I don't know, but maybe they would. But
I don't know about that. I don't know how you'd feel about that.
But in this case, Joey took her back, and they were supposedly going to work on their marriage because they hadn't got a divorce, and they were going to try to make things work for the kids, or so it seemed.
Yeah. Joey Fulgham worked at a car dealership with his brother Shannon. Every Friday around lunchtime, they got paid. And on Friday, May 9th, 2003, Joey cashed his paycheck about $1,020 and put it in his wallet. That's a lot of money.
Yep, it is.
Now, here's what you need to know about that weekend. Joey and Shannon had plans. They were going to an air show on Saturday, May 10th, the brothers' day out, But when Saturday morning rolled around and Shannon called Joey around 11 or 11:30-ish a.m., there was no answer. He drove back to the house around noon, 12:30-ish, knocked on the door, and nothing. Shannon figured maybe Joey was sleeping in, or maybe he'd forgotten about their plans, which happens. But by Sunday afternoon, Mother's Day, Shannon was worried. He went back to the house, still no answer. So he did what any brother concerned would do. He cut the screen on the living room window and climbed inside.
He found Joey face down in the bed, a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Shannon called 911 around 5:30 on Sunday, May the 11th, 2003. But here's the thing, though, Miranda, and this is critical. While Joey's body was being discovered in Starkville, where was Kristi? Let me paint you a picture of Kristi's Mother's Day weekend. Remember Kyle Harvey, the boyfriend? Well, even though Kristi had moved back in with Joey, she and Kyle were still seeing each other on the side, okay?
Oof.
And they had plans for Mother's Day weekend, a trip to the Mississippi Gulf Coast where the casinos are located for a little getaway. Now, Kristi was unemployed, but she told Kyle that she was going to pay for the whole trip, hotel, food, and everything. So on Friday night, May 9th, the same day Joey cashed his $1,000 paycheck, Kristi picked up her younger brother, Tyler Edmonds. Now, that's a half-brother because her father divorced her biological mother, married another woman, had a son, Tyler, which made her the half-sister and their half-sister, half-brother. He was much
right.
younger than her. He was around 13. She's much older, okay?
Yeah.
Early on Saturday morning, around 5:30, she called Kyle, her boyfriend, and told him that she was on her way to Jackson, Mississippi. Joey's stepfather, David Knoll, testified, though, that Kristi had called him between 4:30 and 5 a.m. on Saturday morning and came over and picked up Tyler, which is her son, not to be confused with Edmonds, and Darian just after 5 a.m. And she said she was taking them to the coast.
Think about the timing for a second. Between 4:30 and 5 a.m., that's not sleeping in on Saturday time. That's I need to get out of town time. When Kyle got home from work Saturday morning at like 10:30ish, 11 a.m., Kristi was waiting at his apartment with her 3 kids and her brother Tyler Edmonds. And here's where things get interesting. Kyle testified that Kristi had a large amount of cash on her. She paid for everything that weekend in cash. Souvenirs, food, their hotel room at the Bio Ridge, one of the nicest casinos hotels on the coast. All cash. They spent Saturday night at a hotel and drove back to Jackson on Sunday at around 5 p.m. Right around the time Joey's body was being discovered.
Let's talk a little bit about the investigation. His brother Shannon called 911. Of course, the police came and they found the investigators that arrived. One of them was Robert Elmore. He found Joey face down in the bed with a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. And they noticed that Joey's wallet was gone. The cash Shannon said Joey had in his wallet was gone. But there's something else was missing too. Investigators noticed that the carpet in the living room had a faint outline of what looked like where a computer had been sitting, or what they call a CPU, and it was also gone. Now here's something that's kind of creepy. The house had security lights around the perimeter, the kind that automatically turns on, when somebody walks under them or in the view of them or whatever, except 4 of the light bulbs had been unscrewed, manually unscrewed, so they didn't turn on. Investigators sent those light bulbs to the crime lab, and one of the lab technicians who worked at the Mississippi Crime Laboratory found Kristi's fingerprint on one of them. And here's the kicker. That lab tech testified that you wouldn't expect to find a well-developed fingerprint on a light bulb that had been on for an extended period of time. The heat of that bulb would have degraded the fingerprint. That meant that those bulbs had been unscrewed very recently. So someone basically had unscrewed the lights so they didn't come on, and therefore it would be dark outside the residence. Someone basically who didn't want to be seen,
Yeah.
So the investigation quickly focused on Kristi, and here's where it gets even more disturbing. She didn't act alone. She allegedly conspired with her 13-year-old half-brother, Tyler, to kill her husband. Just as a side note for our listeners, Tyler was initially convicted of the murder too, and that's actually an important point. Tyler Edmonds' conviction was eventually overturned. The Mississippi Supreme Court found that there wasn't sufficient evidence to support his initial conviction. When he was tried again, he was acquitted. So now, based on that acquittal, he can't be tried again for this crime.
Yeah. Okay, JR, let's continue with the investigation part. Dr. Stephen Hain performed the autopsy. He found a small caliber lead bullet, consistent with a .22 caliber, lodged in Joey's head. The entrance wound was on the back of his head, and based on the condition of the body, Dr. Hain estimated that Joey had died approximately 36 to 48 hours before his body was discovered on Sunday evening. Do the math with me here. If Joey was found around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday and he'd been dead for 36 to 48 hours, that puts his time of death sometime between Friday evening and early Saturday morning, right around the time Kristi was making that 4:30 a.m. phone call to pick up her kids.
Yeah, that is a little bit suspicious when you say, yeah, okay, all right. So, as investigators dug deeper, the case against Kristi got stronger. Randy Simpson, who was Tyler Edmonds' first cousin, testified that there had been 2 .22 caliber weapons at Tyler Edmonds' house before Joey's death. But now, after Joey's death, the older .22 single-shot bolt-action rifle was missing. Then there was Kristi's father, Danny Edmonds, and his testimony. It was very damaging in the court. Danny testified that about a week or two before Joey's death, Kristi had asked him for a gun. She told him she wanted Joey dead, that he was mean to her and the kids, but it got worse. Kristi told him he has a life insurance policy and the kids would get $300,000 and I would get $200,000, totaling about $500,000 in life insurance if he ended up dead. So Danny testified that Kristi offered to buy him a Cadillac Ooh, if he
Yeah.
kept his mouth shut about this conversation.
Hey, that's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Now let's talk about life insurance, because this is where motive really comes into play. Scotty Carruthers handled life insurance records for Joey's National Guard unit. He testified that Joey had 2 life insurance policies. The first was worth $55,000, and Kristi was named as the beneficiary. The second policy was worth $255,000. Kristi had originally been the beneficiary on that one too, but Joey had changed it. He made his mother the beneficiary instead. But here's the thing. About a month before Joey's death, Kristi called Scotty asking about the amount of Joey's life insurance. Scotty told her he couldn't release that information because Joey had signed a privacy statement. So Kristi might not have known that Joey had changed the beneficiary on that big policy. She might have thought that she was still going to get that $250,000.
Yep, I bet she did. However, he did change it. I don't know why he didn't change it to his kids, but that we can't ask him, obviously. But he did change it to his mom, thinking that she would probably take care of the kids if something happened to him, especially since, Kristi was doing what she was doing and, with the boyfriend or whatever. Anyway, now let's talk a little bit about the trial. And here was the state's theory at the trial. Miranda, it was pretty straightforward. Their theory was that she killed him for the insurance money and robbed him of his wallet and computer just to have money to go on the trip with her boyfriend. Yeah. Okay? So the jury heard all this evidence, the cash Kristi had on hand at the coast, the missing wallet, the unscrewed light bulbs with a fingerprint, her father's testimony about her wanting Joey dead, the life insurance policies, all of it. So that's what the state presented. And on December 9th, 2006, the jury found Kristi guilty of capital murder. Specifically, they found that she had killed Joey while committing a robbery. And in a capital murder case, there is the first phase, which is the guilty phase. Then there's the sentencing phase where the jury must decide. And in a capital case, there's only 2 outcomes the jury can select. One is death, or the other is prison for life.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the sentencing phase. Here's how the death penalty sentencing works in Mississippi. The prosecution presents aggravating factors, reasons why the defendant deserves death. The defense presents mitigating factors, reasons why the defendant's life should be spared. The jury found 2 aggravating factors in Kristi's case. First, that the murder was committed for money, pecuniary gain. Second, that it was committed during a robbery. Then it was the defense's turn to present mitigation evidence. This is where the defendant tries to humanize the defendant, to show the jury that there are reasons, maybe a difficult childhood, mental health issues, whatever, that should weigh against imposing death. Kristi's defense team called 4 witnesses during the sentencing phase, but there was a 5th witness they wanted to call, and the trial judge wouldn't allow it. First up was Dr. Mark Webb, a psychiatrist. He testified that he'd evaluated Kristi at the county jail. His diagnosis: post-traumatic stress disorder, panic disorder, and dependent personality traits. Why? Because Kristi had been raped by her biological father when she was 11 years old. Because she'd grown up with a series of stepfathers, some of whom were abusive alcoholics, because she'd been neglected and traumatized throughout her childhood. Next up was Carol Morgan, Kristi's mother. She testified about Kristi's chaotic upbringing, the frequent moves, the multiple marriages and divorces, the boyfriends who came and went, the abuse, the instability. Carol was essentially saying, I wasn't a perfect mother, Kristi didn't have a perfect childhood, and that matters. Third was Sarah Ferguson, Kristi's long-term friend. She testified that Kristi used to come to her house as a teenager to escape her scary and mean stepfather. She introduced pictures of Kristi's children and testified that Kristi was a good mother who loved her kids. And this is where the case gets legally interesting, because what Adrienne Dorsey Kidd wasn't allowed to say to the jury. That's what ultimately saved Kristi Fulgham from the death chamber.
Yeah, we'll talk about that right now, and let me kind of explain that. So in this case, Dorsey Kidd had been involved with Kristi Fulgham's family through the Department of Human Services. She had personal observations, and that's key, personal observations about Kristi and her children. She had seen things, documented things that the defense believed were relevant mitigating evidence. But when the defense tried to call her as a witness, The prosecution objected. They argued that Dorsey Kidd's testimony would be hearsay, that she had been repeating things other people had told her, not things she personally observed. However, they had said earlier that she observed these things and made notes about them. So the trial judge agreed with the prosecution and wouldn't let Dorsey Kidd testify in front of the jury. However, the defense made what is called a proffer. That's them telling the judge, hey, look, we want her to testify out of sight of the jury so we can have it on record for later appeal processes that she has the right to. So the judge had to allow that. So Dorsey Kidd had this to say during the proffer. Now keep in mind the jury could not hear this. She testified to four main things. First, that Kristi's daughter Haley had been sexually abused by Kristi's stepfather when Haley was between 4 and 6 years old. Now this is the daughter that she had, but Joey was not the biological father. Second, Kristi's mother had a history of drug abuse. Third, that Kristi herself had been physically abused as a child and sexually abused. And fourth, that Kristi had been diagnosed with depression. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's sad, but how is that relevant to whether Kristi should get death for killing her husband?
Here's the thing about death penalty law. The United States Supreme Court has said repeatedly that in capital cases, the jury must be allowed to hear all relevant mitigating evidence. Not some of it, not most of it, all of it. Here's a landmark case called Lockett versus Ohio from 1978. The Supreme Court held that the Eighth Amendment, the one that prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, requires that a capital defendant be allowed to present all mitigating evidence that might provide a basis for a sentence less than death. The reasoning is simple. If we're going to take someone's life, the jury needs to see the complete picture of who that person is and what circumstances shaped them. So when the trial judge refused to let Adrian testify about Kristi's background, about the sexual abuse in the family, the drug abuse, the physical abuse Kristi suffered, her depression, that was a problem, a big problem.
Yes, it was. This is still the early 2000s, and I think now that things, have really progressed from 2003 to now in 2026. I think the courts are seeing that, hey, this is important. And somebody's background and childhood is important to why things occur later in life. And jury should hear this before making the decision. So I think that's great now. But back then, I think it was just, that's hogwash maybe, and not that important,
excuse.
That's just her trying to get out of this or whatever. So Kristi and her attorneys appealed her conviction and death sentence to the Mississippi Supreme Court. Her lawyers raised a bunch of issues, and I mean a bunch. We're talking about jury instructions, hearsay objections, evidentiary rulings, all sorts of technical legal items. Let me hit a few of the highlights because some of these issues are kind of interesting. First, Kristi argued the trial court should have given the jury specific instructions about being unanimous on everything. In other words, the jury should have said, hey, if she committed a robbery, that he robbed him of his wallet and his money and the CPU, all 12 should have unanimously agreed that that's what she did, not just some of them, because some of them could have said, well, I believe she probably took the money based on what I heard, but I don't think she ever took the CPU. So the Mississippi Supreme Court said you don't have to have a unanimous jury to say that she took both of these items to show robbery. All you got to do is just prove beyond a doubt that she stole these things. And I think we understand that she did steal the money because otherwise, if she's unemployed, why should she have all that money on that trip? Okay. Yeah. The U.S. Supreme Court said, no, that's not required. If all 12 jurors agree that a robbery occurred, then they don't have to agree on which specific item was taken. The court cited a case called, SCHAD, I think, SCHAD versus Arizona, where the U.S. Supreme Court said that jurors don't have to agree on the means of committing a crime, just that the crime was committed. So that argument failed.
Kristi also argued that there wasn't enough evidence to support the robbery conviction. She pointed out that there was very little proof about the CPU, no evidence that it was in the house on Friday night, no evidence about what it was worth, nothing. And as for the wallet, while there was evidence that Joey had cash in his wallet on Friday, there was no direct evidence that Kristi actually took it. But the Supreme Court said the evidence was sufficient. They pointed to the circumstantial evidence. Joey had over $1,000 in cash on Friday. His wallet was missing after he was killed. Kristi, who was unemployed, suddenly had a large amount of cash and was paying for everything on the coast. That was enough for the jury to reasonably conclude that she had taken the wallet. There were other issues too, arguments about hearsay, about jury instructions on reasonable doubt, about whether certain testimony should have been allowed. The Supreme Court went through each one and said no error, or if there was error, it was harmless. But then they got to the issue about Adrian Dorsey Kidd's testimony, and that's where everything changed.
Yes, it did, Miranda. And here's what Dorsey Kidd's testimony would have been at that original sentencing, that Kristi suffered from lack of parental bonding. Her biological father was absent. Her mother was in and out of relationships. Kristi never had a stable, consistent parents. There was substance abuse all around her. Her mother struggled with it. At least 2 of her stepfathers were alcoholics. Kristi grew up in an environment saturated with addictions. Kristi never had a father figure, no positive male role model, no one provided guidance or stability from that aspect. Fourth, despite everything, despite 3 years in jail waiting trial, Kristi loved her children and they loved her. The drawings and letters they sent showed a bond that hadn't been broken even though they were separated for those 3 years. This is powerful stuff, for a jury to hear. This is exactly the kind of mitigating evidence that juries are supposed to hear in a death penalty case. But the trial judge ruled that it wasn't specialized enough. He said the jury could figure all this out on their own based on other evidence. He said Dorsey Kidd's testimony wasn't necessary, so the jury never heard it. And then the jury deliberated, and they came back with the death sentence. And they concluded the trial court made a mistake, a big one. The court noted that Dorsey Kidd wasn't going to testify about what other people told her. She was going to testify about what she personally observed and documented in her work with the family. This was not hearsay, that's direct observation. More importantly, the court said that this evidence was exactly the kind of mitigating evidence that the Supreme Court said must be allowed in capital cases. Evidence about Kristi's background, her family history, the abuse and dysfunction she grew up with, all of that have influenced the jury's decision whether she deserved death or life in prison. So the court wrote, "We find that the trial court committed reversible error by limiting mitigating evidence. Specifically, the court erred by refusing to allow social worker Adrian Dorsey Kidd to testify to her observations as mitigating evidence at the sentencing phase." So here's what Mississippi Supreme Court did. They affirmed her conviction for capital murder. So they're saying, hey, look, there's no doubt she did this. They said the evidence was sufficient, the trial was fair, and she was guilty. But they reversed the death sentence. They threw it out and sent it back to the court, the original trial court, for a new sentencing hearing.
So what does this mean? Let's break down what this ruling means because it's important. First, Kristi is still a convicted murderer. That conviction stands. The Supreme Court said that there was enough evidence to prove that she killed her husband during a robbery, and that conviction is final. But she's not on death row anymore, at least not based on the original sentence hearing. When the case went back to the trial court for a new sentencing hearing, the jury would hear all the evidence again, including Adrian Dorsey Kidd's testimony about Kristi's background. Then they'd have to decide again, death or life in prison. Now, I want to be clear about something. The Supreme Court wasn't saying Kristi doesn't deserve the death penalty. They weren't saying that the crime wasn't heinous enough or that the aggravating factors weren't strong enough. What they were saying is this: if we're going to execute someone, we must do it right. We must follow the rules. And one of those rules, a constitutional rule, is that the defendant gets to present all relevant mitigating evidence. The trial court didn't follow that rule, so the death sentence had to be thrown out. Remember Tyler Edmonds, Kristi's younger brother, the one who went with her to the coast that weekend? He was indicated separately for Joey's capital murder. The state's theory was that Joey pulled the trigger, that Kristi convinced her teenage brother to help her kill Joey. Tyler was convicted and sentenced, but his case also went to the Mississippi Supreme Court, and in 2007, before Kristi's appeal was decided, the court reversed his conviction. They found that the evidence against him was insufficient. So we have this situation where the state believed both Kristi and Tyler were involved in Joey's murder, but Tyler's conviction got thrown out entirely, and Kristi's death sentence got thrown out. It raises questions, doesn't it? About what really happened that night, about whom did what, about whether we can ever really know the complete truth. JR has communicated with Kristi for the past 4 or 5 months about this case, and here's what Kristi told us about her abuse and the night of the crime.
Yeah, I've been talking with her through various methods, phone calls, which phone calls are limited just for our listener. You can only talk about 20 minutes, and then we can actually do text messaging, believe it or not. But again, that has to be approved. It has to go through a review process, so it takes a little bit of time. And one thing about Kristi's half-brother, let's just say, for the sake of saying this, let's say he was involved too. Okay. He spent some time in jail. And then, of course, whenever his first conviction got thrown out, he had to go through the trial again. And then he was acquitted. He was 13 years old at the time. So let's say he spent 5 years in jail. Probably as far as being, what's the word I'm looking for, responsible for it at age 13, so that young.
Yeah.
I think if he was involved, justice was done in his case because she was the adult, much older, and
there was influence there.
Exactly.
Most likely.
It worked out, I think, for the right reasons. Kristi was born to a mother and father that divorced when she was maybe less than 1 year old. After the divorce, her mother moved to California with her mother's second or third husband. Her mother was married 6 times. Okay. That's a lot, right? And that's not counting all her boyfriends. That's just the marriages, okay? What I'm telling everybody now, Miranda and listeners, this is what Kristi is telling me. Again, we haven't verified this, but this is her. So Kristi said not 2, but 5 of her mother's 6 husbands were very abusive towards her mother, and she witnessed a lot of the abuse when she stayed with her mother. So 5 were alcoholics too. And when the abuse focused on her, she would be sent to stay with her grandparents. So Kristi was sent to live with her biological father when she was 11 years old. In her words, he was a very sick man because Kristi experienced both sexual and physical abuse at age 11 when residing with him. So I asked her to tell me more detail about that, and here's one of the things she described. She described an incident of being in a shower when the water suddenly turned extremely hot, causing her to burn. She screamed, jumped out of the shower, and went to her father's room, and he was watching porn. She was naked because she had come out of the scalding shower, and he attempted to have sex with her at that time by inserting his penis in her, but she was 11 years old, and she started to cry, and he stopped. He then, according to Kristi, beat her with his belt buckle and said if she ever told anyone, he would never take her back to her grandparents' house. Now, keep in mind, this is an 11-year-old kid, and her grandparents were the people who treated her the best. Yeah. She said she loved it there. They were very nice to her. Her father tried having sex with her again when she was 15. When her grandparents sent her back to live with him because they didn't like the boy she was dating at the time. I have a couple of daughters, and I didn't like some of their boyfriends, but I could only clean my gun in front of them. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. At this time, her father was living in Georgia. He tried to have sex with her again. She described this event. She said her father came into her room. It was during the summer, and he said she could either do one of 3 things. She could either have sex with him, give him a blowjob, or let him take nude pictures of her. Now, I got news for him, Miranda. That won't win him Father of the Year, will it?
Definitely not.
So he took nude pictures of her and made her put a pillow over her face so she wouldn't be identified or recognized in the pictures. Man.
Right. Afterwards, she told her stepmother what happened. She initially did not believe her. However, later she found the pictures he took, and that's why she was divorcing her father. Her stepmother destroyed the pictures and did not call the police. When she was between 16 and 18 years old, she had a boyfriend for 2 years that abused her when he was drinking. He would hit her, shove her down, kick her, stuff like that. She said she accepted the abuse because everyone in her mom's life, except for her third husband, was abusive to her. So that's what she thought was normal. However, she said that when she lived with her grandparents, her grandfather was a wonderful man, and she knew it probably wasn't what all men do, but seeing men abuse, like her mother, made her believe that at some level it was okay. Kristi said that after she broke up with her boyfriend of 2 years, she dated another guy for about 6 months before she met Joey. Kristi said she and Joey slept together the first night they met, resulting in her becoming pregnant. So she said that they got engaged and married because she didn't want her children to grow up with a broken home and experience a childhood like hers. She wanted to break the cycle. She initially said when they were first married, it was good, but then Joey's temper got bad and life was bad for her. When they were arguing, if she turned her head and just tried to avoid dealing with things, that infuriated him. Kristi claims Joey started abusing her after she became about 6 months pregnant, and then she gave a couple examples of the abuse.
In my conversations with her, she said that they just fell head over heels with, in love. I don't know if you remember, but we did a episode a while back, about love bombing. Okay. And
Yeah.
and research has shown that in the relationship, about the first 6 months, which kind of goes along with what she's saying happened, there's a lot of love bombing going on and nothing's really, everything's great. And then all of a sudden, the true personalities of each individual start to creep out. And in her case, unfortunately, Joey's personality started to creep out, and it was what? Abusive. I'm not an expert, but that's what research has shown. So she said the first time he abused her, they had been married about 6 months, or she was about 6 months pregnant, and he was out with his brother, and they came home around 2:00 in the morning. And when they came home, she was up, and she said, I went outside and I said to Joey, hey, you got a baby on the way now. You can't be doing this party life anymore. You need to be staying home, etc. And after his brother left, they went inside the house, and Joey told Kristi at that time, hey, look, saying what you did in front of my brother was embarrassing to me. All right. And he took his forearm and shoved her into the wall by her throat and kind of slammed his body into her stomach. Another example Kristi told us about was when she was sitting on the floor folding laundry. At this time, she was maybe 7 or 8 months pregnant, she said, and an argument started between them. She can't remember what over, and Joey threw a mustard bottle at her. Now, she said it was a glass bottle, and it hit her hard in her stomach, and that she had a bruise the shape of the bottle on the side of her belly. She said the abuse continued, causing her to have some preterm labor, and she had to also go on medicine. I think she told me it was steroids for the last 2 weeks of her pregnancy to put weight on her son, the abuse that had been happening. And Kristi claims it continued, and that other things Joey did was punch, kick, and choke her. He would put her head between his legs, cross his feet, and squeeze her neck until she passed out. And now I want to tell you about this, Miranda. Research has shown that of the male abusers against their female partners, that over 80%, I believe it's over 80% of the time, choking is one of the methods they use for the abuse.
Yeah.
Okay. And she is relating that he's doing this, along other things.
Yeah.
So that makes me think she's probably being truthful about those things.
If there's that much evidence to support it, probably.
Yes.
Kristi told us about the time Joey first punched her in the face. It was after they separated. Kristi said back then, her way of handling things and Joey's anger was to shut down. When they were in a heated argument, she did not want to say anything anymore, so she stopped talking to him. And this made him angry, so that's when he hit her. Kristi said Joey was rough with their daughter. Kristi said on one occasion, Joey struck their daughter, who was 2 years old at the time, so hard that it knocked her feet out from under her. This made Kristi angry, and she told Joey that if he ever hits their daughter again, that she would kill him. Kristi provided us with another similar examples of when Joey lost his temper and was abusive towards her. One incident stood out. It was during an argument after Kristi got pregnant by another man. It was at Joey's house in the front yard. Kristi said during the argument, she could tell Joey was getting angry. He opened the door to the car where she is sitting and grabbed the car keys and throws them. Kristi said that she was attempting to find her phone to call the police when Joey pulls a butcher knife out of his coat pocket and puts it to her throat. Joey's yelling to her, asking if she is still seeing the person that got her pregnant, which happened to be her and Joey's best friend. She told him no, it was a one-time thing. She felt the knife slice across her throat, and she is feeling the blood dripping down from her throat. Joey let Kristi leave, and as she starts to drive away, she turns in the rearview mirror to see how bad her throat is and realizes it's only superficial. Kristi said, and I quote, "Thank God the knife wasn't sharp." Kristi told us as part of the divorce agreement, Joey had to take anger management and parenting classes. Kristi said when he started the classes, he was much better.
He's escalated his violence using a knife, which is not good, as we know, and that happens in relationships. So if you can believe this, at this time, Kristi is living with a guy named Kyle Harvey, and according to Kristi, Kyle was seeing the girl living next door. So as you can see, it looks like Kristi just hasn't been good at being involved with the right kind of men. He had been seeing the girl next door, according to her, and was making bad choices. So that prompted her to move out from Kyle's and back in with Joey, who had just had a knife at her throat. Life must have been tough on her. She must not have had very many places to go if she was willing to move back in with somebody who had treated her like Joey did. You know what I'm saying, Miranda? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if my daughters had that happen to them, I think they would say, no way.
If I had
Yeah.
any choices.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, Stady, she had no place to go, so that's why she moved back in with Joey. And then she's talking about the night that Joey died. And that's the first time that she said he had hit her in about a year. She said he was much nicer during the time he was going through, counseling and stuff. However, now this is kind of crazy. It all started over a Subway sandwich. Okay.
That's crazy.
Yes. And Kristi said that Joey became so angry over the Subway sandwich, you're going to tell us about it here in a few, that he just totally exploded and assaulted her. But just go ahead and talk about this Subway sandwich thing. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. According to Kristi, before Joey was killed, she brought back Subway sandwiches for everyone to eat. She knew that Joey liked his mayonnaise on the meat side and the mustard on the cheese side. She forgot, and it was backwards on the sandwich. According to Kristi, Joey gets angry to the point that he hits her in the mouth, then leaves the house. Her brother Kyle Edmonds is at the house and witnesses this. Kristi said everyone was crying after Joey left. Kristi told me that Joey came back home sometime around 10 p.m. He asked Kristi if she wanted the couch or the bed. Kristi said she told Joey that she would sleep on the couch because she and the kids, including her brother Kyle, had to get up early and leave. At some point during the night, her daughter peed on her bed, and Kristi told us that she had took her daughter to the bathroom, and on her way back from the bathroom, she heard a sound like a book hitting the floor. According to Kristi, she felt something was wrong.
Yeah. Now, the sandwich, can you believe they're getting that angry to punch her over a sandwich? Here's Kristi's story that evening of his death. At this time, Kristi said she saw her brother coming out of Joey's bedroom holding the .22 rifle by the barrel. He looked white as a ghost in her statements to me, and his eyes were huge. Kristi said at this time Tyler said, and I quote, "I shot Joey." Kristi could not believe what he had just said, and she replied, "No, you didn't," or words to that effect. Kristi said at this time Tyler said, "No, Kristi, I shot Joey in the head." Kristi said she stepped in the bedroom and she saw that Joey was face down on the bed, but she didn't see any blood. And so she came back to the living room where Tyler was, and she was still questioning him whether or not he did anything. And Tyler told her that he was worried that Joey was going to kill her. She was not leaving Joey's house because she had nowhere else to go. And Tyler said he just couldn't take it anymore. So Kristi then told us that she went back into the bedroom again and saw a small trickle of blood on the back of Joey's head. Kristi also said that she panicked at this time, and she and Tyler took the computer from the house. So now she's told me, yeah, I did in fact take the computer from the house and put it in the and put it in the car. I also took the gun and put it in the car in the trunk. She said that she did open dressers and everything to make it, it looked like possibly robbery was happening. She never told me that she took the money, but I think we all conclude that she did. And she called her father-in-law and told him that she was coming to pick up the kids. So that kind of clicks with, again, the timeline, right? I believe it was her father-in-law that testified that she had picked up Tyler and Darian earlier that morning, saying that she was, in fact, going to the coast with them as she had planned. And she did pick the boys up around 5 a.m. So after she got to Kyle's apartment, after he came home from work, she went ahead with her weekend just like nothing had happened, with her husband, laying dead at her house. So why don't you go ahead and tell us some more about what she did?
Jer asked Kristi about telling Kyle she was going to inherit $300,000 from her grandmother. Kristi's response to that she lied about inheriting the money because she thought that there would be no way Kyle would be interested in her because she had 3 children, no job, so she thought telling him he was going to come into some money would keep him around. Kristi said she was ashamed about telling Kyle this, but at the time, it felt like the right thing to do.
So that may be a good thing for you to use, Miranda. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to come into some money. Oh, what you want to do is right the reverse. You want to make sure he's got a lot of money.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? And make sure there's no prenuptial agreement or anything. That's
important.
Let's talk about a few closing thoughts. We know for certain that Joey was murdered in his bed sometime probably early Saturday morning, May 10th, and someone had shot him in the back of the head with a .22 caliber weapon. We know his wallet and over $1,000 in cash disappeared, and so did the computer. And we got Kristi telling me that she took the computer, put it in the car along with the rifle that was used to kill him. She's saying that Tyler came out of the bedroom and had, in fact, shot him in the back of the head. He's 13. I don't see a 13-year-old sneaking into the bedroom, pointing the gun and being able to hold it at the angle that it was done and pulling that trigger all by himself with the bolt-action rifle. My opinion is that she and he may have done it together, but who knows, right? We don't know for sure exactly how it happened. We do have some confessions for Tyler where he says he did it all, but also there's an issue with whether or not he could have pulled that bolt back on that rifle and put it forward. You would have had to do that before you went into the room because that might have woke him up. Okay? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, here's another possibility. Kristi had been abused most of her childhood, teenage years, and adulthood, and everything was going pretty well with Kyle. He wasn't abusive according to Kristi, but things went south with the relationship with him due to his messing around with the next door neighbor, and she had no place to go. And so she moved out of Kyle's, and without having any other place to go other than Joey's, she asked to move back in, and he told her it was okay. Being only there for a few days or weeks over a Subway sandwich, Joey does what? Is violent against her again. I think that might have been the last straw, frankly. And Kristi had had enough. And she was tired of being abused. And she wanted to make sure that would never happen again to her or her children. Is that the truth? I don't know. Is that a possibility? Certainly is. That's where we stand with this case. I guess everybody can make their own opinion about this. Only a few people know the truth. Tyler, Kristi, and I tried to get another interview with her before we published this, but she'd never called me back. Yeah. So I know she had a tough childhood, and we do know that whenever she went, for her second sentencing, that in fact they took everything in consideration like they should have to begin with, and that's when they gave her life without parole, which having to spend your entire life in jail or the rest of your life in jail from whatever age, I think that is so severe punishment. If she is the murderer, she got what was coming, and justice was served in this case with both of them. What do you think?
I agree. If she is the one who actually did it, I think life in prison is the appropriate punishment.
That's all, folks, and we'll be coming back in 2 weeks with another episode. Maybe Miranda will be with me because I like to use a couple of students from my university, or maybe it'll be another one. But I enjoy having Miranda here, and I appreciate you being here and doing this episode with me, okay?
Well, thank you.
Criminology Chats is brought to you by the Chicago School. For more information about the institution, please visit www.thechicagoschool.edu. That's www.CHICAGOSCHOOL.edu. I would like to extend my gratitude to the students who always participate in these episodes. We want to hear from our listeners, so please email us at criminologychatspodcast@gmail.com. That's CRIMINOLOGYCSPODCAST@gmail.com. And also, please check out our YouTube channel at https://www.youtube.com/@Criminology Chats Podcast. This podcast is produced and edited by A.M. Peters with additional post-production services provided by Audio Photo Synthesis. I'm J.R. Ringbolt, and I eagerly anticipate you listening to our next episode. Be safe out there.
The views and perspectives shared in these recordings are intended solely for informational purposes and do not reflect the official stance or policies of the speakers of the Chicago School. Any commercial products and manufacturers mentioned are included for informational reasons only and do not imply endorsement or approval by the speakers of the Chicago School.